Hey everybody, this is Pook here with episode 5 of Tales of a 50-Year-Old Gamer, recording here on October 19th at 8:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the story, it just came in my head a while back and was started thinking because I was thinking of subjects and topics to do for this show, and one that came up was the return policies of stores on video games, especially back in the day, and how I learned a way to, I guess you could say, abuse those return policies. And what I did, I think a lot of kids caught on to doing, ones that and people and adults, of purchasing video game software, and why I think pretty much all stores changed that policy after a certain period of time. I will say, I'll start this off. I was like 13, 14 years old. I had a newspaper route, but I also did other jobs. One of the jobs I did is under the table for a local family Italian restaurant. I was a dishwasher and kind of a gopher in a way, and so I always had money. I learned my parents couldn't afford to give me a lot of money as a kid. So as a kid, I knew from an early age I had to work to have money to buy things that I wanted. So if I wanted a lot of video games, or I wanted a lot of different pairs of Nike shoes or whatever like that, I had to work for it. And that was instilled into me when I was very young. So besides my paper route, which I made, if I remember correctly, at that time, about 13, 14 years old, I made about $120 a month. That's a month, not a week. And I would make money under the table, maybe sometimes $20, $30 a night at the local family restaurant doing dishes, or whatever they wanted me to do, changing light bulbs or whatever it was, things here and there. I would work there maybe 2 or 3 nights a week. And, so I had a nice little chunk of money for a 13, 14-year-old rugrat running around, 13-year-old delinquent running around. And I bought a lot of video games. Well, one of the jobs, this is where I learned about this policy. I was working with this guy because the people who own the local family restaurant also own rental properties and stuff. And I was cleaning out a rental property. There was another younger guy. To me, he was older at the time, but he was also younger. He was probably, I'm going to guess 17, 16. I doubt he was 18. Could have been. And he had I thought he was a cool guy. He had an Iron Maiden t-shirt, and he was, and we were working together. He had a moped too, which I thought was cool. And we were working together, and during cleaning out this house, I found a few Atari cartridges, and I thought, I wonder if they'll let me have these, which they did. They let me keep them, and they would if we ever found. There wasn't too much I ever found, because I did clean some houses out at that age. And I got to explain too, when I was 13 years old, I was probably about 6 feet tall, about the height I am now, and was about 150, 160 pounds. So I was like man size even by the time I was 13, 14 years old. I was bigger than my father by the time I went to high school. So a lot bigger. I was a big kid, and so, I would work. And I stayed on a job and did it. So I had work, but I'm getting off track here. I was working with this young man. He was my elder. And I found those Atari games. And he goes, "Oh, you still play those video games?" I'm, "Oh, I love video games." And I tell him I pretty much spend all my money on video games. And he goes, "Well, why do you keep them?" And I go, "What do you mean?" I mean, he goes, "Well, when you buy it, why don't you just return the game when you're done?" And I said, "Well, I didn't know you could do that." He goes, "Sure, as long as you keep the receipt and, you keep the packaging and everything of the item, it's 30 days, same as cash. It even says so on the receipt. So sure enough, when the next time I bought a game, I paid attention to the receipt, and it did say that at the bottom. And so, and I would do this if it was a game that I really didn't like, or it was a game that we just played through and it was done and we couldn't really trade it with anybody else or anything. But we did abuse it quite a bit, and I taught other kids my age how to do the same. And what we would do is we'd buy a game, play it, and you could keep it up to 30 days, so we keep the game, however long. I mean, if the game really sucks, sometimes we'd turn it back in the next day, and we'd get our full money back, even with tax. We'd get the full money back tax. It was like a free game rental. It was like you usually keep a game. I remember I did it a lot. There was a lot of games after I got done playing them. I'd let friends borrow them or whatever, and I'd get them back, and I just didn't want to play it no more, so I'd take it back and get my money and go buy another game, Why not? Once I learned that, and that was all from this other guy I was working with. He just told me, take them back and get your money back, and you get 30 days. It was like a 30-day free rental. Basically, if you didn't want to keep the game, you could take it back after a month. Video game software was that way at that time. Later on, they changed it where you could only return it if the game was faulty and you had to return it for the same title. But that was years later. There was many years, especially during the NES Nintendo days, where I bought games and just returned them after a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. One that comes to mind was Teenage Mutant Ninja 2, Turtles 2, the arcade game for NES. I remember I bought that game, and I don't remember how much it was, but that's another thing. I hear a lot of people on YouTube were saying games were always $50, and some were over $50, depending on what game. But for the most part, your average titles, a lot of times these retail stores would carry them for $40, $34.99, prices like that when they came out. And anyways, I bought Turtles 2. I don't remember how much I paid for it. Even used the coupon. I believe it was the back cover of the instruction manual, or it was close to the back cover of the instruction manual. Even used that and got the free personal pan pizza. Played the game. Me and my younger brother played the game like crazy for a couple weeks. We even let a friend, I remember letting friends borrow it and stuff. And by the time I got it back, I wasn't going to play it anymore. My brother wasn't going to play it anymore. So sure enough, we put the game, the booklet, and the bag, and the little bag the cartridge would be in and everything, put it right back in the cardboard box, and got my money back. I've done that with a number of games. I mean, there had to be at least 15, 20 games. I didn't do it with every game, though, because there would be some games that I liked enough that I would keep. But I think the victim, but it was kind of, it's not illegal or anything, but it's kind of one of those things where it's kind of almost like a scam in a way, And I think the victim for me was Kmart. Kmart, they always had a decent game selection back then, and they were close to the house, and all they would do is open up the Nintendo box, make sure the game cartridge was in there, and they'd go through the refund. They didn't. Back then it was easy. I didn't think they asked for any ID. I didn't have ID. As a kid back then, I don't think. Not till I got into 15, 16 years old. Then you have ID, your driver's license and stuff. But hey, you would just return it. You had a receipt. You had the product. They'd give you the money. And I'm sure I wasn't the only kid that did that. And I told friends about it, and some of my friends were doing it. I'm sure some of them probably bought a game and returned it 2 hours later because the game sucked or whatever, And I do remember eventually at some point later on, it got to a point where most retail stores would only take the game back. And you had to exchange it for that title, or some stores may have let you pick another game or another title, or whatever. But it changed to where you couldn't just get the money back anymore. But man, we abused that return policy at Kmart and Target were my two, because we had a Target right by the house at the mall, and then we had a Kmart not too far. I mean, far as a kid walking, it was far, but if you're in parents' car or on bike or something, it wasn't super far or anything. And I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if I ever told my parents I did. I think I would. Sometimes my parents would give me a ride to go return the game, whatever. I'd just say, yeah, I'm just going to return and get my money back. They just never really questioned it. And that was one thing with me and my parents. If I earned my money on my own, I could do what I want with it. I mean, my dad would always, go on about, you should save half of that, or my mom. Like, no, it's your money. Do what you want, And dad ended up doing what mom said, anyways, which is, you've been married for a long time. I mean, I've been married for a long time, and I end up doing what my wife says a lot too. So, But yeah, it was kind of amazing to, just from this one kid telling me this, and I told many kids, if you don't want to keep it, keep your receipt, and if you bought it, or your mom bought it for you or whatever, you could go return it and get a different game or get the money back and go spend the money on something else or whatever. But and I'm like I said, I'm sure I wasn't the only kids in every other states and cities that did that, and that's probably one of the main reasons why policies changed at pretty much every store on video game software and stuff was abuse from little delinquents like me. So, but yeah, episode 5, Tales of a 50-Year-Old Gamer. It just kind of crossed my mind I should talk about that. Hope you guys found the conversation interesting and the story interesting, and comment below if you ever did anything like that as a kid back in the day. I mean, you'd have to be around my age or older if you did, because I'm sure later on those policies changed, and that was pretty much like everywhere. It was like retail standard almost on home console games. But I remember it was still going on in the late 80s, because I remember doing that with a couple Sega Genesis games, but it wasn't too much after that. By the time like PlayStation and all that came out, I don't think you could get away with that anymore. So anyways, I hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and have a good evening, morning, afternoon, or whatever time it is where you're at.